Let's add a little detail about the evolution of oxygen. So we left it here. I haven't completed the story in terms of how the sea level change and calcium carbonate deposition by these craters will change. We will look at it again when we come back later to the idea of lysocline or calcium compensation depth in the Snowball Earth and future chapters that come in later. We will also see the details of Snowball Earth later, but in this context here, I wanted to just add the coevolution of oxygen along with this biology and carbon cycle that we are looking at, and biological role in it, and so on and so forth. So going back a little bit further, if we go towards the earlier part of the Earth's history, life, as far as we know, can be found as far back as 3.85 billion years ago in terms of evidences in rocks of the earliest life forms, biotic material, and so on. But here we are going to look at Archaea, which are the earlier form of prokaryote cells without any nuclei, and bacteria that came along. So you are going here from 3.5 to about 2.2 billion years ago, and that's called the Archaean, which comes from arches, the beginning in Greek, which means that's the beginning of life that we can detect as far as current evidences go. And there is other evidences by geochemical evidences that tell us that oceans were anoxic, which means the dissolved oxygen in the water was really low. When that happens, iron in the water remains in a soluble form called Fe++. So it is got 2 electrons and no surface sulfur cycle. So anoxic waters also make H2S that remains in crystal form and undissolved and so on. So the partial pressure of oxygen in the water would be less than 10 to the minus 5 of the present oxygen levels. And then at some point the oxygen increased, so coming into the time period of evolution of oxygen here, as we will see in a minute. And these are the snowball periods. The Maganian and Sturdian and Marinoan are the Snowball Earth episodes where, as I said before, almost all of the global Earth was covered in ice, including the oceans, which would trap the oceans from exchanging gases with the atmosphere. So slowly ocean would become anoxic, and then once the glaciers, the ice melts, there is exchange, and then you have increasing oxygen. So you are now into Proterozoic, which is early life. Then you have Phanerozoic, which is visible life, where you have evidences from fossils and so on. So here surface waters are oxic, but deep waters still remain anoxic and sulfidic. So this is probably referred to as euxinic. So here partial pressure of O2 is less than 10 to the minus 1 of the present, but you can see there is some question mark there. So evolution of Eukarya and fungi happen. So Eukarya are the ones which have a nucleus in the cell, as opposed to the prokarya. And then you have the other episodes of global glaciation, probably driven by various processes. And here, when you increase oxygen in the water to a certain level, then the iron quickly oxidizes and precipitates out and leaves evidences like banded iron formation, which we will see later on again. And sulfur also goes into dissolved forms, gypsum to pyrite, and so on and so forth. I won't get into the details, but just mentioning that oxygen and carbon cycle are going to be tied together. So in the Phanerozoic, then oceans are basically oxic and they are sulfate rich, because sulfur is also going to become soluble. Then plants evolve, metazoa and other life forms evolve, Eukarya and fungi continue, Archaea and bacteria continue. So you can look at the oxygen cycle in this way, going a little bit further back here to the origin of the solar system. Bacteria, Archaea dominate the Archaean period. Hades is hell, so Hadean is basically where all the bombardment, tectonic movements, volcanic eruptions, primordial soup kind of situation existed, and as far as we know there was no life. This is the beginning, as we said. This is early life and visible life. So there are regional glaciation evidences in banded iron formations and other depositions that we call capped carbonates and so on. This is global glaciation, 3 of them here that we looked at here. And this is the oxygen level. So jumped up here around 2.2 billion years ago. This is moved around a little bit now because of other evidences. Then there was uncertainty in the oxygen levels. Algae evolved, probably lots of photosynthesis, colonization of land, post-Cambrian, and then animals, fungi, plants evolve, and then photosynthesis, large-scale carbon drawdown, probably responsible for this Snowball Earth episode, and then you have oxygen reaching the current level. So this is the partial pressure of oxygen in the atmosphere, going from 0.1% of the current level to 100% of the current level. Okay, so that's kind of the story of oxygen evolution along with the CO2 cycle. They are tied together. Also in terms of calcium carbonate burial and organic carbon burial, and weathering rate draws down CO2, but oxidation of the organic matter, respiration if you will increase CO2. So there is always this oxygen CO2 tied together. Plus the, what else can I say about it? We don't know as much about the oxygen cycle as we know about the carbon cycle, because the evidences of geochemistry work very well for carbon cycle but not so well for oxygen. That's why you have large periods of uncertainties like this. Not that carbon cycle is completely certain, but the models we have for reconstructing carbon cycles are much better. And to understand that, we have to go into how isotopes work and how geochemistry has given us a rich body of evidence for Earth's history, geologic history, as well as climate history and biological history. So we will look at those things in the next podcast.